This is the Leadership Podcast, and we study leaders. This is episode 509, featuring Dr. William Kline, Executive Director of the Academy on Capitalism. Thank you for joining us today. This is Jim Vasilopoulos, founder of Rafty Advisors, and this is the Leadership Podcast.
Hey everybody, Jan Rutherford here, founder of Self-Reliant Leadership. Thanks for making us a part of your day as we study leaders, and you can find our whole catalog at theleadershippodcast.com. And this episode, like so many in the past, has been sponsored by Darley, and they're trusted by warfighters and firefighters since 1908. Darley's dedicated to equipping our military and first responders with essential tools they need for mission success, from fuel and firefighting pumps to drones and tactical solutions. You can learn more about this great company and the people who serve our nation's heroes at darley.com. Darley, you serve others, we serve you.
Yes, and today we welcome our esteemed guest, Bill Kline. He's a professor of business ethics and the executive director of the Academy on Capitalism. His research, teaching, and work with the Academy focus on the ethical foundations of business and capitalism. Bill, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Great to be here. And I hope if your viewers like this, they'll hit the like button, and maybe I'll get some people to hit subscribe for you too. Thank you very much for inviting me on your program.
Thank you, Bill. Hey, what's not in the public bio? Something about you people might not find online.
Oh, wow. That's a tough one. Some things that people might take a little deeper digging to find out. I went to Grove City College. I studied under Hans Sennholz. And I actually went to high school and college with Scott Bullock, who is the executive director of the Institute for Justice. And so I've been doing this capitalism thing for a long time. Something that doesn't probably show up is I speak a little Hungarian, and twice I lived in Hungary. And I love playing my guitar at open mic nights. Bob Dylan is a staple of mine.
We've had so many guitar players on this show.
I'm an entertainer. I wouldn't say I'm a guitar player. I can strum, but yeah, it's fun.
Well, that movie about Bob Dylan with Timothy Chalamet was pretty great. I'm sure you saw that.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I want to watch it again, actually.
Yeah. Speaking of guitar, we watched the Led Zeppelin one, Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, that one. I don't know if you've seen it. That was really good. I really enjoyed that.
No, I would like to.
Yeah,
I would very much like to.
It's on Netflix. It's worth watching. I thought I was always a big fan of Led Zeppelin, but I was really impressed with Jimmy Page afterwards, and even John Paul Jones. I mean, like, really, these guys were fantastic. Good stuff.
Easter egg. Harry Chapin.
Here you go, Jan. Yeah, Jan's favorite. Yeah, that no one who's
Little
listening to
Cats
the
in the
show-
Cradle, little taxi going on. Yep, I'm all over that.
There you go. There you go. So, Bill, you're the executive director at the Academy on Capitalism.
Yes, sir.
Really interesting organization. For listeners encountering your work for the first time, what problem does the Academy exist to solve? And why is that important right now?
All right. So I think it's pretty safe to say that universities are fairly left-leaning. And I don't mind viewpoints being taught at university. I'm not advocating, I never do, for something to be taken away from the university. But we know that they're pretty left-leaning. They are pretty hostile in general to capitalism. Even the business schools, you wouldn't believe, have that going on. And I think it's a tragedy for students not to learn about capitalism, about its ethical foundations, and about the results of capitalism. And we're there to fill that gap. And we're also here to fight back against a little pessimism, right? So yeah, the universities are left-leaning, but I think a lot of people have given up on universities, saying, oh, there's nothing you can do there, you get canceled and blah, blah, blah. Hey, it's hard work, and you've seen that up close, Jim. It's hard work to do that. There's a bureaucracy. You constantly doing diplomacy, but you know what? It's not impossible. We're here. We've been here since 2008. And, if you're a good university citizen, you keep it academic, and you have an argument behind you of why you belong there and what you're trying to portray, you can make inroads, and students love it.
Yeah. How long has that sentiment been there? Has it been there since, the 50s or 60s? Is it new? Is it the university sentiment against, maybe capitalism, or is it improving, getting worse? Where do you see help us understand the temperature right now?
Well, so interesting question. So not that I'm any huge fan, but Nixon called Harvard Moscow on the Charles. So this is nothing new. And maybe it's just kind of self-selection for like people who want to get PhDs and stuff like that. I don't know if it's temperamentally that. I think though what changed, and possibly and around a little after the 2000s, was kind of the tenor of it. And it got more politically aggressive. I attribute this to some theories are out there on, say, about feminism. I have nothing against feminism, please, but there are strains that say everything's political. And that's all it is. It's just political. And so if you get into an office or a seat, then it's your job to politically maneuver so that your friends, it's like something out of the Republic, right? So that your friends and those who believe like you do get power, and those that you think are wrong, evil, or not your friends, they get pushed out of power. And I think we've seen that. And I've yeah, pretty vigorously. And we've seen universities in general take a turn from educating to you know, producing little social justice warriors.
Yeah.
Um, so, so that's the thing that kind of has changed. I don't know if it's necessarily people being left of center, but how that finds itself in practice, right? When one gets into a position of power. And by the way, and I want to tell other people this, what's interesting is when I came to Springfield, that's also what made possible for me to actually form many friendships, if you will, allies, so that we could do our programming. Because it wasn't, not everybody there was a libertarian, or actually nobody there is a libertarian, but there were a lot of people who believed in the power of ideas, and they believed in the power of books, and they believed in the usefulness of open debate. And so you end up forming a coalition with these people, and they're there. They're quiet, but they're there. And that's one of the things, like I said, that's the academy will never quit on university and university students, because the people are there that want to engage. Students are there who want to learn, and we're going to provide it whether the university does or not.
Yeah. So Bill, your academy emphasizes sort of the ethical foundation of capitalism, yet because ethics and markets are often seen as contradictory, what do you believe the core ethical principles are that, for essential, capitalism to work well, and where do we most commonly fail?
All right, and this is one where, and I'll say to Jim, one where I think Jim and I might disagree. Jim, when I interviewed him, talked about black markets and capitalism. I don't think that black markets are capitalism. I don't even think they're markets. I think to have markets, period, you have to have ethics, because you have to have property rights to enforce. You have to be able to enforce trades and contracts. If you don't, you can have a location where people trade. We've been doing it since people were druids, right? And moving rocks in Ireland. But that's not a market. To get prices, to get well-functioning finance, that all doesn't exist unless you have some notion of mine and yours. You have a general cultural appreciation of that, so people respect it, and also some sort of institutional structure, whether it be the state or private arbitration, that looks out for people when they're trading and contracting and attempts to mitigate disputes such that trade can continue. So I'm not talking about fines like regulatory fines. I'm talking about simply, that's it, moderating disputes so that trade can continue. So capitalism does not exist without ethics. I think that's one of the things people don't understand,
Yeah.
or I would
In
argue.
in ethics and virtue, I'm just curious, Bill, if you know who William Deresiewicz is.
I know a lawyer named Dershowitz, but I don't know who,
They're
if
actually
that's who you're
cousins.
referring.
Well,
Other cousins. Okay,
it's,
so
it's William Deresiewicz is a past podcast guest. He wrote what was the book on sheep, Jim? He wrote,
Excellent sheep.
yeah, and is critical of Ivy Leagues, basically.
okay.
But a year or so ago, Jim told me about this podcast that he was on. He lives in Portland. He's pretty progressive, and he basically did a 180 on capitalism, and it was really fascinating. I was just wondering if you saw this guy. I mean, you literally on the podcast got to hear him think out loud, and what was interesting was he's over 50, and he's like, a progressive mind, is willing to change and bend and those kind of things. Is there any part of the way you've looked at capitalism when you were young that you look at it differently now?
Oh God, we will not go into my political views before I was 18. That's a mess. I always have to kind of qualify. I read Rand when I was 18 and I love her writings. It doesn't mean I'm a Randian, but I never looked back. That's why I went to Grove City, was to study Austrian economics and moved on from there. So one of the things, though, I had an idea while you were. So did this author do a 184 or a 180 against capitalism?
For capitalism.
So he went. So
He basically said, it's not perfect, but it's the best thing we got.
So here's one change, and I think this is an important avenue people who are for capitalism can walk down if you want. So throughout the 80s and 90s, if you were talking free market, you were also talking about ending the welfare state, right? And so as soon as I opened my mouth up about, free markets, people are like, why do you hate the poor? And like, what? And then we start talking about welfare and transfer payments, and we never get back to the heart of the matter. So there's this thing published by the Fraser Institute called the Economic Freedom Index of the World. I might have the title kind of wrong there, but they do a Freedom of the World Index. And not this year, but if you look around 2016, 2017, we were like 16, 18 on the list and headed south. And places like Canada were in front of us and New Zealand. And so I asked one of the authors, I'm like, hey, what's up? They got like nationalized health care and they're higher on the list. And he's like, well, security of property rights really factors majorly in this. The size of the state does matter because it, can raise tax rates and stuff like that, but it has a smaller impact than people think. And the idea came to me, and this is what I tell my students. I'm like, look, here's a discussion I want to have. Take your favorite social program and we're going to put it over here. We're not going to talk about that. That's yours. You can keep it. I want to talk about the ease of doing business. And when we start talking about the ease of doing business, we're going to see how people can get out of poverty. We're going to see significant differences in per capita GDP, probably $12,000 to $14,000. Like if you had a program that could put $12,000 to $14,000 in a person's pocket without taxing anybody, would you like to try that? So let's have this as a quiver or an arrow in our quiver, right? Where we make things easier to do business and put on hold the whole conversation about welfare payments. That's changed with me. I used to couple them in the standard conservative dialogue that still exists today. I decouple them now and approach them separately. And I think that opens ears up. I think that opens ears up.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate the kind of like dialogue we can have, which is like, hey, here are ideas, we kind of differ, here's where we can learn from one another. And I think it's evident in kind of all the discussions you and I have had. And as well, I think in even the conversation Bill Deresiewicz was having with himself on that podcast, which I thought was fascinating. But when we're having these discussions, what's so common with socialism versus capitalism, which is, becoming another discussion point today recently, is that people compare the ideal of socialism with the reality of capitalism. And I think to Jan's point earlier, it's like, well, it's like, it's not perfect, but it's as good as we got. Why is it that people get so caught up in this kind of unfair comparison? Because the reality of socialism is not as it's just as ugly as the reality of capitalism, if not uglier.
Oh, no, it's uglier. So kind of an analogy comes to mind. Like when you're selling your house, were you there personally, or did you have a real estate agent doing it for you? Right? Probably had a real estate agent doing it for you. And I've come to reflect on that, and that's very smart because you've lived in the house. You know everything that's wrong with that house. Every single wart, every leak, every creak, every draft. And if you're showing the house around, it's really likely that you might point that out. Not that we're dishonest when we're selling things, but unless it's a material defect, we don't need to go into the weeds like that. And that's the thing. When you live in something, whether it's a family, whether it's a house, heck, whether it's a neighborhood, you know all the bad. And as human beings, I don't know why psychologically, I've asked people this, I've asked psychologists, we tend to retain the negative. And it tends to build up over a lifetime too. That's why you get angry, I guess, when you get older. I really fight that, right? But the negative really makes a sort of emotional mark on, you know, factors of information, and we retain it. And we haven't experienced the other thing. It's all golden charms. It's beautiful. All we've heard about it is the good. And I know the crap and misery I'm living in. So bring it on. I'm happy. But, there is a reason, and some of the viewers might not know this, but, the Soviets built a wall across Europe, not just around East Berlin. They built a wall across Europe. And that's precisely because all these people were like, oh, this is wonderful. Once you got on the other side and learned, oh my God, this is worse, you couldn't get out. But, it's history. And I remember the wall falling. But my students, that's ancient history to them. So we have to go through the debate again. And you can't get that's why the academy exists too. You can't get tired of it. You can't say we've already been through this, you should know it, because no, they weren't even born. They have to be taught this again. They have to be told this. And if they're not, how are they going to come to know the warts, if you will, the awfulness that was the Eastern Bloc? So, yeah, I think it's a psychological thing. We do it in human relationships too. We see people ruin their lives like that. The devil is always uglier.
I think that analogy with the house is really powerful. That's a good one. I really like that one. I think that really kind of speaks to it. I am just still kind of befuddled why people who, I don't expect the 19-year-old college student to, understand some of this stuff and from a history standpoint. But I do kind of expect the professors to be like, hey, you're teaching economic history and history. Like, you should be able to say, like, hey, give me good concrete examples where this has worked exceptionally well. I mean, you can go into the communist countries today. My son spent a summer in Vietnam. It's a communist country, but it pretty much is thriving because of capitalism. It's not thriving because of communism.
No, no, I've been to Vietnam a long time ago. Not that long ago, but 15 years ago. Yeah, exactly. And I think, to start things off, when you were asking what the academy does and maybe what the consequences of not fixing the problem are, I think you just touched on it. I mean, we have people who don't know, professors who aren't teaching it. We elect people like Mamdani to be mayor of New York, who's openly socialist. And on the other side of the fence, we have people who think that economic isolationism and tariffs will lead to economic glory. It's a mess out there. And yeah, that's what happens when people, abandon teaching that. And, like you said, to learn that history, unfortunately, the way that the universities are geared today, that's not the things that get taught. And it's having consequences for who goes to college too. Like if you wanted to go and just kind of learn history and all the stuff that we were talking about, and not the gender power relations in Harry Potter, not making that up. Got very few places to go. And since the beginning of the millennium, I was just talking to my dean about this. Since the beginning of the millennium, there's 1 million fewer men going to college. I'm not saying that's entirely because we don't teach capitalism, but seriously, all the things, they want to go to work, they want to earn, they want to build good communities, they want to build good households, and they want to have a good life themselves, right? All that's portrayed as evil. So why should I go into that place? and they're voting with their feet, I think. And I think that has disastrous political consequences as well.
Yeah. It interesting problems. We're probably not going to solve them today, but it's worth talking about it and just getting them out there in the open. But we talked a little about history, and there's this wonderful company that has a very long history called Darley. Been around since 1908. They're based in the Midwest. They've been a trusted partner to the U.S. military and first responders for over a century. From mission critical defense equipment to innovative firefighting solutions, Darley ensures our heroes are equipped for success. Learn more about Darley's dedication to excellence at darley.com. That's DARLEY.com.
Thanks, Jim. Hey, Bill. So I want to pick up where you left off. You're talking about young people and their view of capitalism, work, success, those types of things. Was it not a lot to argue with you on that? I have worked with a client, and together we coined a phrase, virtuous capitalism. That was working behind the scenes. And again, it's a company that's in construction, so it's a different demographic than maybe a company in Silicon Valley. But I'm wondering, from your perspective, what do you think leaders must do today, regarding capitalism to demonstrate and earn trust of younger people in that system?
Well, first thing is you can't badmouth the system and then expect anybody else to like it. So you've got to have some buy-in. If your outlook is pessimistic, dark, dog eat dog, it's just whose neck you can stand on, I promise you the people you attract and the people who listen to you will be the same. So, if you want a better company culture, if you want people who work towards productivity, then some kind of positive stance towards capitalism, markets, value-added activity. I think that's incumbent on leaders. I think it's incumbent on them to be outspoken, and even outspoken in the face of cynicism, right? Because they say, we're here to help the public, and people are like, yeah, you're just here for your profits. Be like, yeah, we're here for our profits, but here's what we do, and here's why people like us, and this is how we conduct business. The Academy has a YouTube channel as well, and I've had the pleasure of interviewing quite a few business people who that is their outlook, and they are outspoken about it. So you got to be virtuous, but you can't put your lamp under a basket, because if you do, then darkness wins. So step one, it's not just to have and be a person of integrity. It's to explain why, so that people can see it.
Yeah, another past guest we've had on twice is a woman named Margaret Heffernan out of the UK. And I don't know, Jim, if you saw this a couple days ago on LinkedIn. She posted something like, we've totally bastardized purpose. It used to be pretty straight, simple, maximize shareholder profits. And then we've tried to create all these other things. And she's like, it really is back to maximize shareholder profit. Do you have any opinion on that? The whole, the purpose that it's got to be altruistic and all those things, or do you think it really is pretty
You
straightforward
know,
and simple?
so one of the reasons I like markets, or hell, I love markets, is there's not one solution, right? The kind of pen that I use or mug I drink out of, maybe nobody else does. You guys all have different ones, right? And so, when it comes to um, purpose, I think that there are multiple ways to approach that. I think it's I think it's unfortunate in two ways that when people like her say this, it's always the finance model. And that's the one that it best fits, right? Because when I'm in finance, I want the highest return for my money. That's what I want. I'm looking for percentages. It's numbers. It's math. And that is perfect there. If I mess with that by looking for other things, then I am really messing up people's retirements or my own retirement or whatever else. But say I'm in a service company. Maybe I started a service company. I don't understand in a sense what maximizing either shareholder value or profit means, because I'll have revenue coming in and there will be a net over that, which is profit, of course. But how I allocate those costs to keep the business running, there's an infinite way I can do that. And if I want to focus on the customer by better customer support, better customer service, repairs, and stuff like that, and that's what I put my money into, because that's what our company's really about. If you want some other bells and whistles, let's say, you know, different appliances, whatever, you go somewhere else. But why is that bad? Right? You have to make decisions about running your company. So if you have some kind of vision or some kind of goal, or maybe your company's like all about the employees, right? We give a good customer experience, but those costs, once again, how we allocate them, are really to treat employees well, because we really want to attract top flyers here. We want really people who do X, Y, and Z, and that's what makes us shine. That's our thing. Okay. That's beautiful. Why does it have to be just one thing? Why does it have to be finance everywhere? But that's, it cuts the other way too, right? Oh, Starbucks is for clean water. You should only finance what's clean water. No, stay to your side of the road, right? That's what you do with Starbucks, but finance is something different. And enjoy the multiplicity rather than try to figure out which one answer is right for everything.
Yeah, I like the fact that, we have the opportunity to kind of have choice. And,
Yeah.
choice is, that's the free market. It's like you can decide what you want to prioritize. You can decide what you want to accentuate. You can decide, what you want to do. I think that's fantastic. I, you
Yeah.
know, I go back to when we met in person, and we were doing an event, and, it was terrible weather, very cold, and sparsely attended, which was fine. We had a great time. But there was a conversation we had in the hallway, and it was almost like a whispered conversation, because there was this hesitation that faculty members had about kind of openly supporting this, or, being part of this. And, there was a reluctance. What is driving that? I mean, I kind of, you hear things, but I was like, the fact that we were out in the hallway and you were like hushing your voice, like, really spoke something to me. Like, what's going on?
Well, as I said, people have become more strident in the belief that it's not about education. It's an institution that should turn people out who believe certain things. And I don't even take that approach with the academy. There's certain things I want taught. I hope people understand, and then you're on your merry. But universities really kind of, what are your beliefs? I had a professor once come to me when I was teaching in a different department and said, "Oh my God, your student, he's a racist." And I'm like, "Holy crap." And he starts telling me, like, he's sitting with this black guy and they're in the same group and he's racist. And what am I going to do about him? And, you'd think the house was on fire. And I'm really concerned. I'm like, "Oh my God, what did the students say? What trouble are they causing? Are they inciting violence? Good Lord." And so finally I asked this person, I was like, "Hold on a second. Can you just put rubber to the road and tell me what you mean by racist? I'd like to get some perspective." He's like, "He's against affirmative action." And I'm like, "That makes almost the entire Republican Party racist." He goes, "Oh, yeah, exactly." I'm like, "Get out." Seriously, I'm like, "Get out." That's the kind of atmosphere you're dealing with. We went from debating affirmative action immediately to racist. And then that's powerful. That gets you labeled. That can get you excluded. So we have that kind of atmosphere. But the stridency that we're talking about, I saw coming in 1999. I was teaching at the University of Toledo part-time. I was teaching bioethics. And I had this woman who was a nurse. She was an older woman. And she did work with Doctors Without Borders. And they would go down to South America into these very violent regions to, treat these kids with hydroencephaly or whatever, with their heads getting really big and stuff. And to relieve that pressure. So she's been in the muck. And she's like, "I don't know what to do with my class." I'm like, "What?" So she had a women's studies class. She goes, "First, the professor chased all the men away." And that's something I continue to hear today, right? Because they don't belong there. And now the professor for an assignment wants us to bring our favorite sex toy. And if we don't, we won't pass the class. And that's the kind of thing. right? That's the kind of thing that if you're in a class and you don't toe the line, or the professor simply doesn't think you belong there, yeah, you can be driven out. I'm not saying this is with every class, but it's with enough. I see it with my students. They just simply try to parrot what the professor says. And I know why. There's enough professors out there that if you don't, yeah, you end up losing.
So what happens then? What's the cost of, whether it be intellectually or culturally, when people choose, let's say, not just silence over honest engagement, but just that kind of like compliance. Like, yeah, I'm just going to go along, get the grade. I'm not going to have that debate. I'm not going to have that argument. I'm not going to stand up because I'm just trying to get through the system. I mean, what are we losing there?
Oh my God. We're losing a lot. So the first thing is the very thing that you described doesn't sound attractive to me and doesn't sound attractive to a lot of young men. So they're not going to college. And there's young women who aren't going to college either. Numbers are down. Why bother? Second, if you're there, if the first 2 years of your education, let's say, through the humanities and whatnot, are hostile to business, and then you go into business, what kind of psychological kind of internal fight do you have to actually want to look forward to doing business? And if you can overcome that, right? And like, okay, I want to do business. I want to be part of capitalism. Then you're stuck with the awareness that you just wasted your first 2 years of education. And that's not a small sum of money. So anger, bitterness, cynicism, I think they come out of this. I think personal theory, right? I think the left has done an exceptionally good job of undermining respect for the Constitution of the United States. Just a bunch of white men. It's a racist document. And a bunch of people on the left, not everybody, we're talking, but they agree. They agree. Horrible document, should be overturned, should be rewritten. I think that message in an odd way has reached a certain segment of the far other side on the right, where they don't buy into all the left stuff, but they agree that the Constitution is just written by a bunch of dudes and it was for their benefit and not for the benefit of society. And I think you see that coming out on the right as well, with people, bad mouthing classical liberalism, open societies, First Amendment, free speech, freedom of religion, all of that, because that document is just written by the self-interested and it bears no truth or inherent respect, and should be eliminated. I think, if I'm answering your question, I think you were asking about the results of all of this. I may have strayed. If I did, bring me back on the path, but that's what I'm seeing with all of this. And why does it stay there? People believe it, and the people who don't stay out. So you end up with an echo chamber, and that tends to become a very stable equilibrium. How's that going to internally change?
Well, speaking of not echo chambers, the Academy on Capitalism, you've hosted and learned from a lot of different people. Do you think there's one question, Bill, that more leaders or educators need to ask themselves about capitalism, and what that question might be, and what happens if we don't ask that question?
I like this quote by Marcus Aurelius in Meditations. Know what the nature of the thing is, why it's there, and what it does. And I think this is about a lot of subjects, but do we really know what capitalism is? I mean, best guesstimates, maybe it started around 1700, 1800. It's only 200 years old. Humans been around for thousands of years in feudalism and all kinds of different political systems. And here we have this relatively new thing, and both practitioners and critics alike kind of think they know what it is already. And, part of what I teach in my class, and I've had people come and speak about this too, the common law of contracts probably goes back to about 1600 in England. Common law of property goes back to about 1400. What do people know about that, right? Before they jump into these outrageous claims about, all property's racism. Or, by the way, I can do anything I want with my property or not. Look at the history of the common law. That's not it either. You have property rights and you have property responsibilities. That's very clear. So yeah, I just think a bit of humility, like maybe we should learn more about what this thing really is and what's really going on. What are aberrations? What are hangovers from other systems? What are bad parts of this system maybe we could fix, and start with that rather than, just assuming from the get-go we know what this ism. I know what that is, and now it's just proving I'm right about it.
It's an interesting discussion, Bill. And this is probably one of the ones that I think is probably going to spark some interest by our listeners, I'm sure. Do you have any closing thoughts from our listeners?
Yeah. Have fun with ideas. Because as soon as you stop having fun with them, everything gets grumpy and awful. The seminars we run, they're all run. We run summer seminars. We have fun. We have debates. It's not personal, right? It just simply because you don't agree with my economic system doesn't say anything about me as the person. Let's put that at arm's length so that we can talk about the ideas. And then if we want, we can go have a glass of wine or beer or bowl or whatever we like to do. So, I think that's part of the game too, and part of living the good life. So that would be the one thing I would say. Let's take a step back from making everything personal on all sides.
Excellent. Bill, we've really enjoyed having you on the show. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing this on YouTube. So thank you very much.
Yeah. And for our audience, that's all we have for you today. We'll include ways for you to connect with Bill in our show notes, so make sure to visit us at theleadershippodcast.com. And remember, I was guilty of judging capitalism by its operations and socialism by its hopes and aspirations, capitalism by its works and socialism by its literature. Sidney Hook.
It's a wrap.
Thanks for listening to the Leadership Podcast. To listen to more shows or to access the books and content discussed on this show, be sure to visit theleadershippodcast.com. The material in this podcast is copyright by Rafti Advisors and Self-Reliant Leadership and must have written approval before commercial application.